I have no stories of fancy places, no idea that's going to cure anything, no history of hard times that's going to make anybody cry. What I do have is myself, and that is enough. This is an exercise in realizing we are not as lost as we think we are. So most of my life is spent in predominantly white schools. Half of my family is white, and eventually everywhere I went, I was the other. Even when I was surrounded by black people, I was the other. I went from this to this, and 1 year, and it stayed that way for a while. I'd like to know that this picture is from the first school I transferred to, and out of the 42, 43 students, we had at least 13 who were black, the most out of most of the schools that followed. And so I didn't have the language to understand what was happening to me. Cousins making fun of my dark skin was just Tuesday. White people asking me where I learned to speak was just curiosity. And kids calling me the N-word, they were jerks, but it was still just Tuesday. I just didn't know what to do. I think because I existed in aggressively homogenous spaces, I thought these experiences were unique to me. And so I knew I wasn't supposed to like myself, and I didn't. I remember trying to pour bleach on my skin because people told me I was too dark. I remember trying to scrub as hard as I could because people told me I was covered in dirt, and as a result, I have very soft skin, but it left me with some pretty deep invisible scars. I had a vague understanding of what was happening. I knew what was being said wasn't okay. I knew there was a problem, but I thought it was me. And like most problems I had growing up, I didn't think there was anything I could have done about it. Power was located outside of myself, and it was going to take me a while to realize I could have taken it back. So whenever someone called me the wrong name, or sent me death threats, or said I was pretty for a black girl, it felt familiar, but it would hurt more because I would remember each time it happened before then. So this past fall, I was introduced to the idea of emotional memory. Remembering a situation, an event, or a person can often trigger both good and bad emotional responses. They serve as a guide to move forward. So for example, if you eat something that makes you sick, you are likely to avoid that food in the future, but then also think about the time that made you sick whenever you see it. Or if you have a bad experience in a relationship, you may start to grow weary if similar signs start to show with someone new. And to protect ourselves, we may try to apply that same principle of avoidance to future relationships. Toni Morrison provides another definition of emotional memory through an analogy of water. She says, when we say flooding, we really mean remembering. The water is remembering where it used to be and is always trying to get back to where it was. She says writers remember too. It's an emotional memory that is deeply embedded in the body, the skin, the nerves, even the muscle. I think all people are like that. As kids, we subconsciously pick up pieces of our environments. We respond and reflect and react to what we've been given. So when people call me names or say that I am pretty for a black girl and get offended by me not appreciating their compliment, I have to understand that they may not realize that this is not the first time I've heard it, and it also isn't the last time. And I can't avoid these situations, so they start to build up. Another way you can look at emotional memory is through my time here at Middlebury. Even though I've been here for 2.5 years, most days I question whether or not I belong here. And so if I'm walking around during Parents' Weekend or sitting in rooms surrounded by paintings of past presidents, there are constant reminders that this place was not made for me. And this gets internalized. So when I'm walking around and someone's parent comes up to me and says, "Excuse me, are you a student here?" I already know what's about to happen. When they ask me if I like it here, what I think, I stop, I look away, and I start off with, yeah, it's Middlebury. I do this to buy time. I don't know what they're looking for. I don't know what type of answer I feel like giving to them. I just know that I feel uncomfortable. But I can't avoid these situations. And after what feels like hundreds of talks and questions from people who don't seem to care to understand, I don't know what to do now. Going off of this idea of emotional memory is generational memory. So a picture of my great-grandmother right here is a great depiction of our relationship. Either she's smiling, I'm not, or I'm smiling and she's not. So ever since she found out I was coming to Middlebury, she has never failed to tell me about her time in school. She went to Natchez College, which is a private, historically black college in Natchez, Mississippi. It was founded in 1885. She even went on a full ride. I know it meant a lot for a black woman to go to college in Mississippi during her time. And so there are a lot of parallels between our journeys to and through college. Her journey is defined by the people she met, people who supported her, and even people she didn't really get along with. Instead of telling me about the experiences, she tells me about the people who made them up. Hearing her stories makes me feel a little less lost at Middlebury. From her, I learned how to navigate rough places. From her, I learned how to be grateful of where I am while not tolerating mistreatment at the same time. This is just one example of generational memory. I feel like I know things I never learned or experienced. A broader example of this would be the talk. And so when I say the talk, I know everyone in here has a different understanding depending on their background. While my parents never had to talk with me, I've come to realize that it consists of more than how to act with police. For some, it is how to survive predominantly white spaces. For others, it is how to act in public because they're more visible. Either way, it's all about how to keep from getting lost. Another way to look at generational memory is how generations are shaped by history. My generation is characterized by sensitivity. Snowflakes, political correctness, the terms go on. We're also characterized by ruining markets from chain restaurants to department stores. Whether this is rightful or not, you cannot deny that the world seems to be changing every day. At the same time, there's truth to the quote, "The more things change, the more it stays the same." Every day, there is something new, and we have to respond. Together, we are cultivating this generational memory and documenting it on shared platforms. It is here we learn we are not alone. It is here we find solutions to problems that exist somewhere. And if we don't find the solution, we at least find some motivation or inspiration to make our own. And so, what I've learned from generational memory is I am not as lost as I think I am. I've been here before, whether I remember it or not. Whether it was my mother or hers, I have the generational and the emotional memory, and I am never alone. Here, I let the body remember. I let the floods return and realize work was done to get me here on this stage. And if I want to know where to go next, if I want to know how to get there, I have to be prepared to know what made me and where I come from. A crisis isn't just a crisis if we've been there before. This makes me think of James Baldwin, who says, "Everything is always changing." And the measure of our maturity as men and as nations is how well prepared we are to meet these changes and further use them for our health. What does this even mean? What does James Baldwin have to do with me or my great-grandmother? How can we apply emotional memory to our health as nations and as men? I think a working example of this would be education. It is always in crisis. And I think, I think most of us can agree that the purpose of the education system should be to prepare students for what they may face, whether that be as a generation or as individuals. However, education is always the first to be cut and the last to be considered, often at the expense of students. And so when people say, "I can't believe what is happening in the education system," my response is, how can you not believe it? We have seen this before, and you didn't have to have lived through No Child Left Behind or Common Core standards to understand. The crises in schools have less to do with the schools themselves than poverty, segregation, the way schools are funded, and other issues that are heavily tied to history. History that does not change. Let's use Chicago as an example. From budget cuts to TIF funds to school closings, Chicago public schools are a mess. And so in 2012, during the Chicago teachers' strike, the whole nation watched. I was able to stand at the front lines with my teachers, and my approach to education changed forever. What the strike was about and what it meant to me took a while to solidify. But through conversations with my teachers, I realized that I have more control over my education than I thought. I also realized that they were more than the people who just stood at the front of the classroom. I came to know and to love them. One of the most important lessons I learned was education is more than high school, more than something I had to do. I also learned that we need to listen to the experts, in this case, teachers. The issues of the past are the issues of today and will continue to be that way unless something changes. From this, we see children receiving the same messages, such as the talk, or how to survive in an education system that is meant to fail them. And sometimes I sit here and I don't know where to go next, but then I sit here and I realize that if we have seen the effects of poverty and segregation on the education system, why are the issues still there? If children are coming with the same circumstances and coming with the same memory, why are the problems still there? Of course, these questions are rhetorical. What we should be asking is, how can we use these memories to move forward and get it right? Sometimes emotional and generational memory won't work together to give the same answer. I work at the student-run cafe on campus, and last spring during preview days, I was opening alone. While we opened at 9:30, when I got there at 9, there was a crowd of people waiting for me. By 9:45, the line was at the door, everybody wanted lattes, and for me to tell them about my experience here. And so for the first few, I was polite, service with a smile. By the 5th, I just wanted to make lattes. By the 7th, I really did not know what to do. I had emotional memory on one side telling me to tell them what they wanted to hear, make your lattes and go home. On the other side, I had generational memory telling me to tell the truth and to respect people older than myself. I did choose emotional memory, and the shift went by a lot quicker. I don't know if I regret that or not. And so sometimes these memories are pulls that pull you at the same time. For some people, this makes them feel lost. But I think if you have an option, what type of person are you going to be? How are you going to move forward? What is going to get you through right now? There's at least a way to go. We are not as lost as we think we are. Emotional and generational memory exist for a reason. So during my senior year of high school, I took African American Lit with one of the most extraordinary people I have ever met, April Coleman. And while I learned a lot in her class, the phrase I repeat to myself whenever I feel lost is, everything you need is everything you have. Sometimes when the poles are pulling and my memories are at odds, I realize they are both part of me and I cannot go wrong. We are not as lost as we think we are. Is this an idea that's going to cure everything? No, but it may help you find it. Thank you.